McLaren just made a shocking move, cutting all data sharing between Norris and Piastri in the middle of practice at Abu Dhabi. Within minutes, the FIA launched a new investigation demanding answers about what McLaren is trying to hide. Did one car gain a secret advantage, or is this the start of a massive team meltdown before the title decider? Subscribe now, because if McLaren's firewall explodes, this could reshape everything about the final race of the season. What began as a routine Friday in Abu Dhabi turned sharply into controversy before the first hour of FP2 was even complete. McLaren, a team locked in the most intense championship battle of the hybrid era, made the extraordinary decision to stop the live data exchange between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. On the surface, this may look like a tactical call to protect driver-specific setups. But inside the paddock, and now inside the FIA's technical office, it raised a far more serious question. What kind of configuration is so sensitive that it cannot be shared between teammates? The FIA responded quickly. Within minutes of McLaren's decision, officials opened a formal investigation into the team's data management practices. According to internal sources, this wasn't triggered by a complaint from another team. It was proactive. The governing body immediately flagged the move as a potential breach of the sporting code, specifically under provisions that guarantee transparency of data during race weekends. In a championship deciding round, where both legality and fairness are non-negotiable, such a breakdown in internal access is viewed not as strategy, but as obstruction. The core issue is trust both inside the garage and across the sport. F1 teams run incredibly complex telemetry systems, which feed real-time information between both sides of the garage to aid development, setup comparisons, and strategic decisions. Cutting that connection mid-session doesn't just disrupt operations, it signals something deeper. It suggests that one side of the team is either being shielded or isolated, and that kind of internal tension is exactly what the FIA cannot afford to ignore. Especially when it concerns a title contender. Lando Norris was fastest across both practice sessions, and looked at ease with the car. He delivered blistering pace and consistency in both qualifying sims and long runs. But Oscar Piastri, who missed FP1 due to the young driver session, returned for FP2 and never settled. He finished far off the pace, struggled for balance, and repeatedly complained of braking and traction inconsistencies. Under normal circumstances, the team would use Norris's data to help Piastri adjust. But by firewalling that data, McLaren effectively left their second car flying blind. That's what caught the FIA's attention. Officials are now focusing on whether the move was made to conceal a specific car configuration possibly related to energy deployment, torque mapping, or even suspension parameters. In today's hybrid-era cars, even the smallest change to rear diff mapping or regenerative braking strategy can provide a measurable advantage. If Piastri's car was operating in a more conventional setup while Norris benefited from something more aggressive or borderline legal, stopping the data flow could be interpreted as an attempt to hide that difference. It's not just a tactical decision, it's a regulatory red flag. This tension now places McLaren in a precarious position. They are leading the performance charts, but they've opened the door to an ethics debate. Is this about protecting a title lead or controlling information that shouldn't have existed in the first place? The FIA is not accusing the team of cheating. Yet. But the mere act of blocking data between teammates during a live session, when both are active on track, changes the dynamic from racing to legal risk management. And in Formula One, perception alone can trigger consequences both competitive and reputational. For the rest of the grid, the development has become the central topic of the paddock. Engineers from rival teams immediately began reviewing sector data to compare energy recovery, throttle application, and GPS traces between the McLarens. Some patterns matched. Others didn't. Verstappen's camp, watching closely, saw a possible opening. He doesn't need to lead every session, he just needs the rulebook to step in when someone else crosses the line. And right now, the stewards are watching McLaren more closely than anyone expected. Lando Norris opened the weekend with a statement lap in FP1, 1 minute, 24 seconds and 485 thousandths. It wasn't just fast, it was surgical. No snaps, no oversteer corrections, and a balanced car through every phase of the corner. McLaren looked perfectly dialed in from the first push lap. As the session wore on, Norris continued to build rhythm, stringing together consistent runs in the 1 minute, 25 range, with low degradation and no visible loss of traction through the long, sweeping corners of Sector 3. Oscar Piastri, however, was nowhere to be seen in FP1. McLaren had assigned his seat to young rookie Pato O'Ward for mandatory rookie mileage. That left Piastri on the sidelines, watching telemetry and track evolution without any wheel time, a difficult position on a technical circuit like Yas Marina. It also meant that when he stepped into the car for FP2, he was essentially starting from scratch, with no baseline reference and a track that had already evolved significantly. FP2 quickly exposed the gap. Norris once again topped the timesheets with a blistering lap of 1 minute, 23.083. That put him a full 3/10 ahead of Max Verstappen and nearly 7/10 ahead of Piastri. More telling than the raw gap, though, was the body language of the car. Norris was visibly able to attack the apexes with confidence, particularly in Sector 1, where early turn-in and throttle application are critical. The McLaren rotated cleanly, and Norris could carry speed mid-corner without fighting the rear. Piastri's session painted a completely different picture. His early laps on medium tires were already a step behind, hovering in the low 1 minute, 31 range. Once he switched to softs for his qualifying simulation, the delta improved but the driving remained tense. He fought with rear rotation through turns 5 and 9, locking up into turn 6 and visibly lifting earlier on throttle. Radio feedback confirmed it. "The rear's just not biting," he told the pit wall, prompting setup discussions that appeared to go unresolved during the session. The real performance gap emerged during long-run simulations. Norris maintained lap times in the 1 minute, 29.3 to 1 minute, 29.6 window on mediums, with extremely stable tire behavior. Verstappen, running a nearly identical program, started in the high 29s but dropped off to the low 30s after 5 laps, suggesting higher rear degradation. Piastri's run, by contrast, was erratic. His laps fluctuated by as much as 7/10, indicating either inconsistent car behavior or driver adaptation issues still unresolved after the opening laps. One detail caught engineers' attention across the paddock. Norris's throttle trace appeared unusually smooth through acceleration zones where other drivers showed minor corrections. Particularly out of turn 7 and turn 14, Norris could open throttle earlier and hold it without rear slip. That kind of traction control isn't illegal, but when paired with the team's decision to halt data sharing with Piastri, it raised the question, was Norris operating with a slightly more aggressive or differently calibrated torque delivery map? Piastri, deprived of Norris's telemetry during the session, was forced to develop his own baseline. In a session like FP2, where setup tweaks are measured in tenths, lacking that comparative reference can mean the difference between confidence and confusion. Whether McLaren intended to protect Norris's settings or avoid exposing something more controversial, the effect was the same: one driver flew, the other floundered. And now, with the FIA looking into the internal data firewall, every lap completed under those conditions is part of a growing dossier. The core of the FIA's concern lies in the systems that govern how power is delivered from the hybrid power unit to the rear wheels. Every modern Formula One car relies on a complex blend of internal combustion torque and electric deployment from the energy recovery system. This blend is regulated through highly detailed torque maps that decide how aggressively the car accelerates out of corners. When McLaren halted the data exchange between their drivers, it created an immediate technical risk because the FIA had no way to verify whether both cars were running compliant, symmetrical torque profiles during the session. The very act of limiting visibility raises questions before any illegal behavior is even suspected. Torque mapping is especially sensitive at Yas Marina. The circuit features multiple zones, such as turns 5, 7, and 14, where a car's ability to apply power early can deliver huge time gains. Engineers often refine these maps to give the car a sharper response without triggering wheel spin. But these refinements must be declared to the FIA and must be consistent across both cars unless formally approved. When Norris emerged from FP2 with traction levels noticeably superior to most of the field, yet Piastri described unpredictable rotation under throttle, analysts began to wonder if the differences were simply setup preference or something deeper within the power distribution strategy. The FIA's technical team is now focusing on whether McLaren's sudden firewall was an operational decision or a protective measure to avoid exposing a mismatch between the two cars. Under normal conditions, team engineers rely on bidirectional data to align balance, braking, diff settings and deployment modes. Cutting that bridge mid-session deprives the second car of vital information and, far more significantly, denies the FIA an immediate comparative dataset. In a season finale where one driver is fighting for a championship and the other is struggling to adapt after missing FP1, asymmetric data visibility becomes a potential regulatory issue. Rear suspension behavior is also at the center of the investigation. The MCL39 has undergone several small but meaningful refinements that improve traction without destabilizing the chassis. Observers noted that Norris's car exhibited controlled squat under acceleration, allowing him to maintain speed through the exit phase without visible over-rotation. Piastri's car, in contrast, displayed irregular weight transfer that forced him to wait longer before applying full throttle. These differences may reflect individual driving style, but they could also indicate disparities in damper curves, anti-dive geometry or rear toe adjustments. When paired with block telemetry, the FIA must verify that these variations remain within the bounds of internal fairness. Part of the inquiry involves the car's energy harvesting system. The way the battery collects and deploys energy affects braking stability, corner rotation, and acceleration. If one car harvests more aggressively in certain zones, it may produce additional stability under braking. If deployment is more progressive in another, it may generate traction advantages. These behaviors are not illegal by default, but they must be documented, declared, and available for FIA review. McLaren's delay in transmitting full harvesting and deployment profiles triggered a procedural breach that the FIA will now evaluate frame by frame. Software mapping adds another layer of complexity. Teams routinely adjust throttle sensitivity, differential locking and brake migration to match driver preference. But when these parameters differ significantly between teammates, engineers must provide justification. The FIA's concern is not that McLaren found performance, it is whether the performance was shared, declared, and legally configured. By isolating their cars, McLaren removed the natural cross-reference that helps validate mechanical and electronic parity. Even if nothing illegal occurred, the disruption itself forces the FIA to examine whether the team operated within the transparency requirements outlined in the sporting and technical regulations. From a technical perspective, McLaren may well have acted out of caution rather than manipulation. But in Formula One, perception is inseparable from regulation. When a team running at the top of the timesheets freezes internal data flows on a championship weekend, the optics alone can shift competitive pressure and regulatory scrutiny. The FIA must now determine whether McLaren's move was an operational decision or a violation of procedural trust. And until they deliver their findings, every lap completed on Friday carries a shadow of uncertainty that will influence strategy, psychology, and the final shape of this title fight.